Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the Series 2000 series. And it's the final book, book number 25, Ghost in the Mirror. Now I just want to say, this is one of the handful of Series 2000 books from my childhood I never got around to reading. And recently, after the holiday season, after I've been so swamped, I know I've been active for a couple of weeks, I just wanted to come back and just make a couple of reviews and some haul videos for you guys, and this is one of the things I read throughout the holidays when I had time because I was curious to read about the book. And I have to say, after the first time reading this, I don't know if this might change after the second time, but this book has so much potential to be one of the greatest books in my opinion. There's so many qualities about this book that are reminiscent to a lot of the above average books and a lot of the excellent books I've rated on my channel so far. Even in some of my favorite books, this book has exceptional qualities and even unique qualities that I think no other Goosebumps book that I personally read have gone to. This book is really dark and very graphic, very violent for a Goosebumps story. It almost feels out of place to be in the Goosebumps series, but I'm glad that it appeared in Series 2000 because Series 2000 is known for its more visceral stories, even though, Original 62 had those visceral stories here and there. But Series 2000 is known for kind of going a step beyond, like using realism, extreme situations, body horror, gross out themes and elements, as well as just really out there graphic depictions of things going on while in the stories. And this book kind of plays on a lot of themes that make Goosebumps great. This has a couple of fantasy elements, a couple of callbacks to books like Let's Get Invisible, which it manages to do its own thing, surprisingly. As you can guess, Ghost in the Mirror, Let's Get Invisible features a mirror. You can honestly expect there to be some type of connection. When it comes to Stein writing stories, often he'll borrow from previous books. That's to be expected with this, but this book did do its own fair share of original things. It did go to violent places that I don't think Goosebumps will ever go to ever again. And it feels very unique, and a very unique experience because of how the story envelops. And the first half of this book was, I would actually say the first 2/3 of this book were absolutely excellent. But the failed landing of this book, especially in the third act, the final third of this book, really tanks this book. This book had a lot of great ideas, but often with, books with, great setups, great concepts and stuff, concepts don't get elaborated on. The big shocking twists in the story don't really feel like they belong in the book. They kind of feel out of place, especially dealing with the antagonist and the twist ending. The entire third part of this book just doesn't really fit the way I was hoping it would. But I would recommend this book to anyone out there maybe curious to read this. This is one of the darker ones. I'm going to say off the bat, I would recommend 10 years or older for readers. This one does get kind of violent. But yeah, it does have its problems. And I'll get to that at the end of the video. So let's start off with the plot overview without giving too much away. This one is, there's a lot of rivets in this story, a lot of ups and downs. I'm going to kind of just skim the surface, okay? So the main character is named Jason. And all you need to know about Jason is that he's the younger brother in the family. He has an older sister named Claudia, and he has a best friend named Fred. He doesn't really have much friends. He's kind of a nerd. He's not really all that athletic. He's more of a black sheep in his family. And very early on, his older sister named Claudia is an absolute puke of a sister, and she's just absolutely terrible to him throughout the whole book and never lets off, mind you. But she's just pranking him and making fun of him and making fun of his room for having baby furniture. And Jason's mom intervenes with the altercation and explains to them and, new information to us readers that they are in poor financial situations. Their father recently lost their job. They've been trying to find work for him and potentially having to move out of their house. And it's a good commentary to have for a character in a Goosebumps book. Very rarely do you get somebody like Jason as a character who has poverty as a background. And the explanation for his baby furniture is that they just can't afford or haven't been able to set aside money to be able to get Jason new furniture, and that Claudia should not make fun of Jason for that. But Jason kind of shrugs it off, and before you know it, Jason comes home one day, and his parents have surprised him with a brand new dresser and a standing mirror. Now, these are brand new to him, but these are actually used, and it's implied that they were bought from a furniture store. The origins of the mirror and the dresser never were explained, but as you may know from the cover Ghost in the Mirror, that the mirror is the object itself is going to play a huge part in the story. Now, I just kind of want to get over this tangent before I get any further. When a Goosebumps book is focused around a certain object, like a mask, a mirror, or whatever the case may be, origin, or a cuckoo clock, for example, the origin of the object is important for context. And I will say this with every single Goosebumps book that's reminiscent to this, and object-centered Goosebumps books, it's important to include the origin of the object. And I know I didn't say this back on my Cuckoo Clock of Doom review, and I didn't say why I deducted points on that video because it was so early on my channel, but the main reason why I deducted points on that book and gave it like a 4.5 was that there was no origin for the cuckoo clock, and I had no idea, and I can never wrap my head around why it was able to do what it was able to, and I was wishing that the book kind of dived into that more. It's really no different here. I'm just going to be honest, the origin of the mirror and the dresser never get elaborated on. But anyway, Jason's finally excited to get some new furniture and be able to replace new furniture in his room. He's so excited he invites his best friend Fred to come over, and him and his friend Fred are going to play some video games. And when they're playing video games, they think they notice something moving in the corner of the room where the mirror is now sitting. And when they go to look over there, they find a note on the ground saying, beware, something on the lines of like, beware that wherever this mirror goes, it will bring evil, something like that. So this freaks the two boys out, and immediately Jason thinks it was Claudia playing a prank. And when he confronts Claudia, Claudia says, I never left the note. And she seems pretty sincere about it. And then Jason's dog Buzzy seems to be pretty scared about the mirror. But they can't really put a finger on why Buzzy is scared of the mirror. So the next day, goes and comes, and Jason finds himself coming back home, and or maybe it was around dinner time that same night. I read this a week or two ago. I kind of forget parts of the story, but there comes a point in the book where I'm trying to get to is that Jason's telling his parents about this mirror and this note he found and how he thinks Claudia played the prank on him. And then they hear barking coming up from upstairs. And Jason goes up by himself because he knows it's his dog Buzzy, and he goes inside of his room and he sees that Buzzy just looks completely different. His hair is standing up, he's growling, he's barking ferociously, and he's trying to get Buzzy to calm down. And then Buzzy proceeds to bite him in the neck, and it depicts this scene graphically where he's bleeding from his neck. And Buzzy's just become basically like a rabid dog, and Buzzy just cannot stop staring into the mirror. And Jason freaks out, and his dad grabs the dog and puts him out in the garage in the shed. And Jason's concerned about Buzzy because he's like, Buzzy's not acting like himself. Something seems weird, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. And then later that night, he proceeds to hear whimpering, whimpering coming from inside of his room. But then when he looks around and tries to hear what's going on, he hears the barking from the dog still outside. And that continues on until the next day. And he meets up with his friend Fred, and they come over after school to try to play some video games. And Jason goes downstairs to make something to eat. And when he comes back upstairs, his friend Fred is missing. And before you know it, he has no idea what happened to his friend Fred. And he tries to, ask around his family. He's like, have you seen Fred? Did Fred leave? And he was kind of upset. And then later that night, he thought he saw some other apparitions in the mirror. And that kind of plays into what happened the day before, but I don't want to get into that because that can kind of spoil a good part of the story here. But anyway, the next day, he meets up with his friend Fred, in gym class. He's like, oh, why'd you leave my house yesterday? He goes, oh, I had something to do. And they're about to go, play a typical game. Like, I think it's basketball. And Fred, it's depicted in the book that Fred's terrible at basketball, but now all of a sudden he's really good and he's very aggressive. And, Jason has an altercation with Fred, and he makes a comment saying, hey, you're acting like you're possessed or something. And Fred's like, what do you mean? And proceeds to tackle him and beats him unsensibly. And of course Fred gets suspended from school, and Jason's in the nurse's office, and the nurse makes a comment saying, hey, you look like you got hit by a truck. And Jason makes comments about Fred's like a scrawny tall kid. There's no way he can be that strong. And he starts to kind of think that maybe this creepy mirror might be doing something to the people that he cares about, like his dog Buzzy and his friend Fred. So later that night, he sees some clouds forming in the mirror, and he goes up to it, and he thinks he sees the apparitions of his friend Fred and his dog Buzzy. And when he goes up, he gets pulled into the mirror, but before he goes into the mirror, he grabs something off of his dresser, which was a hand mirror, and he brings that into the mirror world itself. So when he gets inside, it's freezing cold in the mirror world. He has no idea what's going on. He has to try to find a way out. He's confronted by a ghostly apparition that looks like himself. He's put two and two together, and he's realized that the mirror is making copies of whoever is being sucked into the mirror and is being put back out into the real world. And then he meets the being behind what's going on in the story. And this is where the book de-escalates from here. Okay, so this monster, the apparition, is trying to escape the mirror, but Jason pulls out the hand mirror and it creates duplicates of the creature what it's revealed to be, and the creature starts fighting itself enough to give him enough time to leave the mirror portal, and he leaves the mirror, and everything kind of reverts back to normal. But Jason, throughout the story, has kind of been doing the "you gotta believe me" stuff, but it hasn't been the forefront. And then he's really trying to convince his parents that this mirror is evil, and this mirror is doing something. His parents shrug him off, saying, "Yeah, you have an overactive imagination." Where most books would just repeat this until the book just becomes repetitive and nauseating to get through, it does the "you gotta believe me" right, where Jason realizes that the only way he's going to get himself out of this situation, instead of complaining about it or asking for help, is to do it himself. And he thinks that he has to figure out a way to get the new Fred and the new Buzzy into the mirror and get the real Buzzy and Fred out of the mirror. So when it comes to the next day, he realizes that there's been a hole chewed in the garage door and Buzzy has escaped, and this freaks him out, and he realizes that since if he can't find Buzzy now, he might as well go find Fred. And when he goes to find Fred, Fred gets so enraged that he lifts up a car over his head like the Incredible Hulk, and he realizes that these creatures are too powerful, and that maybe he's going to have to find another way to do it himself. So He tries to tell his sister, the truth, and his sister's like, yeah, whatever. So he's like, okay, I guess I'll do it myself. So later that night, he gets the mirror, the hand mirror again, and he goes back into the mirror, triggering the cloud, and he's able to go into the portal. And when he walks in, he, thinks he sees Buzzy, but he hears the creature roaring, and he falls seemingly forever, and then he falls down into this pit where he finds the real Fred and the real Buzzy, and he's happy to see them. But then the creature then reveals itself to be this ugly, hideous monster, and that it's really mad that it didn't let it escape the mirror, but it's now going to escape the mirror and basically take control of Jason's life. And so Jason, the real Buzzy, and the real Fred have to find a way to get out of the mirror world, and they find their way up to the front entrance where they can leave, and they realize they're not powerful enough to break it. So Jason holds up the mirror to Fred to create some duplicates of Fred to try to destroy the mirror, and it just doesn't work. And then they realize that holding the mirror up to the portal will open the portal, and they get through the portal, everything's fine, but then there comes a point where they have to confront the big creature. Now, I don't know if this was ever really wrapped up. It's like, where is the evil Buzz? Where's the evil Buzzy? Where's the evil Fred? I don't think that ever got wrapped up, but Jason sees the monster trying to imitate him, and the monster then shows its true form, which is like, I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say Jason has this altercation with the monster, and he rips out the eyes of the monster, which tumbles it back into the mirror, and everything seems to be solved. The kids don't want to know where the other evil ones are. They just want the whole situation to be done. And what happens is they decide to smash the mirror, and the mirror breaks onto the floor, hopefully to trap the monster in there forever. So as they're, the twist is, while they're cleaning up the mirror debris, there's a twist that happens, and that's where I'll leave it, because the twist is pretty ridiculous, but I don't want to go any further. But that's basically, in a nutshell, Ghost in the Mirror. Alright, for starters, let's start off with the positives of the story. The first half of this book was excellent. I mean, every single choice Stein made in this first half was perfect. I mean, perfect. You couldn't have gotten a better sympathetic backstory for a character. You couldn't have gotten a better exposition, a setup for the mirror. You had a good side character like Fred. The whole thing with Buzzy, the whole thing going on with Buzzy, and the scenes with the biting of the neck, and the clone Fred beating up Jason and hating Claudia. I mean, there's so many things that are reminiscent in Goosebumps, but I think this book just did it very well. The You Gotta Believe Me stuff was done, like, if I had to pick a book where You Gotta Believe Me is done correctly, it would be this book. This should be the template of how to do You Gotta Believe Me in Goosebumps. It was done great. Perfect. The suspense, you can cut it with a knife. The body horror was there. The violence was there. The stakes, this book had stakes building up. I mean, it felt like it was building up to something. I was hoping that it would build up to some origin behind the mirror and the dresser. Or maybe this creature is like, maybe it's like a portal to the afterlife, or something great and grander than what the story was initially trying to hint at just by looking at the cover or reading the first half of the book. But this is where we get to the negatives. After all that great, basically 100% A plus first half, or I'd even say 2/3, the moment the creature reveal happens when Jason first goes into the mirror world, not by choice, and discovers what this creature or being is, does not fit this book, okay? This creature being can best be described as a giant crustacean that creates spirit apparition, or traps the spirits, or I guess apparitions of the real people inside of the mirror, and then creates clones and shoots them out of the mirror to be super clones, like strong, vicious, animalistic clones. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense. The villain in the story arguably makes the least sense out of almost any Goosebumps book I can think of. I mean, nothing makes sense about the villain here. Not to mention, since we got no origin of the mirror, your mind is only going to take you to certain places about the origins of the mirror, and none of it can still make the villain make sense, okay? That's how depressing the villain reveal is in this book. And I'd be lying if I said that the villain reveal was fun or something. The villain was pretty scary, and it did have its moments near the very end, especially when Jason rips his eyeballs out. That was very graphic and brutal. But other than that, it just really didn't click for me. Okay. Another thing that was, I guess, a positive because of the reveal is that these, this once the fake Buzzy broke out, and then you saw the Incredible Hulk version of Fred lifting up a car over his head. Those ideas were really good. Like, I wanted to see them, like, destroy the town. I wanted to see them, like, try to, like, make people, like, cause destruction and mayhem. But we never even got that. All we got is a car lifted over Fred's head. Like, that's where I thought the story was going. It never went down that route. It never went down that afterlife route. There were so many questions that went unanswered. By the end of the story, after the mirror gets smashed, then we get to the twist, which is probably, I guess, the least impacting negative for me personally, but I know a lot of people hate this twist ending. It comes out of left field. They could have used this twist to maybe say that, hey, Claudio was a clone this whole time. Or maybe they could have said, hey, maybe the world you live in is actually the mirror world. Joke's on you. Or is this anything else besides the twist we got? And I'll tell you this, the twist ending is so dumb that I laughed, and I thought it was hilarious. It's shocking. Don't get me wrong. It's shocking, and you don't see it coming. But it's so dumb that it's hard to take the book seriously as an end result. I don't mind a silly, lighthearted ending after a dark book like something like this. But when you give me something like that, it leaves me very mixed, Stein. Just something fell out of translation from the first 2/3 of this book to the final third of this book. The first 2/3 was telling a jarring mystery with brutality and violence, and you felt like it was going to build to something grand and spectacular. But then the final third of it just fizzled. And I mean literally just fizzled. Nothing. Nothing really spectacular happened minus the whole eye-ripping scene. It's just a big disappointment. So, given those issues, I found myself not wanting to give this book higher than a 4 because it checked so many boxes off for me that I wanted out of a book, but it just didn't hit those boxes that qualify an above average or higher. Like, it kept the steam throughout the whole story. There was some type of evolution or anything with the characters. I feel like there was a de-evolution, and those negative checks just took away from the positives and kind of balanced it out to make it more of a 3.5 to 3.9 range. However, I knew that I was going to give this book a good or an average rating between that range, but I decided to land on a 3.9 and only deduct 1.1 points off the top from 5 stars. So I gave this a 3.9 out of 5. The 1.1 comes from just the entire third half of this book collectively, I would say. Just a big miss. Even though there were some highlight moments in that final third part, just a big miss. Just a big miss. And I think 1.1 is deserving for just that entire third. And it all adds up. So I gave it a 3.9. I think it's higher on the average scale, but that might correlate differently depending on how much somebody loves or dislikes this book. Maybe if I reread it in the future, I might score lower, actually might score higher, but this is how I will currently rate it. So yeah, that's my review of Ghost in the Mirror. Let me know in the comment section if you have read this book. Did you love this or did you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.